Aloha, welcome back to Aina Bear Farm. So, it's been a while. Had a lot of rain here. Lots of just weather making it a little difficult to make some videos. But I wanted to do kind of a fun update today. We're looking up towards the food forest. And one of the things you probably notice is all of the Tithonia, Mexican sunflower, in bloom. So with all the rain, that stuff just exploded, and I hadn't had a chance to come out and prune it. So it all flowered, and even though we usually like to chop and drop it before that happens, it's kind of fun every once in a while to see all the beautiful flowers and the bees and butterflies happy. It's kind of an added bonus to having the Tithonia. And one of the things that's cool from this view is that you can see how we use the Tithonia as a windbreak for a lot of our fruit trees. And so each one of those plants is upwind of a fruit tree and has been doing a great job as a windbreak. And then now we're going to go in there and chop and drop and just add all that organic material around the fruit trees. So I wanted to kind of give you this before shot, and then we'll show you a little bit of that work of us taking them down, and then we'll do an after shot, see what it looks like in the end. So thanks for checking it out. All right, so we've got a couple tools here. If you've been following our channel for a while, you know we're pretty low tech, low budget. So just got our loppers and our tree saw. Some of these have gotten so big it's probably easier to just saw through them, and the ones that we don't need the saw for, we'll just take off with the loppers. And you can see where they've already started growing little side shoots here. These, if you stick this in the ground, will, and generally keep it moist, it'll turn into a new tree. So these are pretty easy to grow from cuttings. Well, they only grow from cuttings, and thankfully they're pretty easy to grow from cuttings. So a lot of times what I try to do when I trim them at this stage is I cut them at a point where there's still a couple of those side shoots coming out. That way they'll recover pretty quickly. And then we'll take this in a second and use that as a chop and drop for our kaimito tree, our purple kaimito, which is right next to this. And also, as I mentioned, we use these as a windbreak. And there is the risk that it will get very windy before these have a chance to fully grow back. And we just kind of roll with that. You know, it's just a part of nature. But as long as my trees aren't experiencing constant wind conditions that cause them to grow almost sideways, then I'm pretty satisfied. And then of course, these will grow back much thicker than they were before, and they'll provide an even better windbreak than what we had. So that's pretty much takes care of this one. For a lot of our fruit trees, we have two, because the winds, they come off of the ocean and they come sort of like almost fully south or west, and they shift a little bit, but they almost never come from the other way. And so once these kind of grow together, they'll form a nice protective barrier around the tree. These are probably small enough to take with the loppers, but kind of on a roll with the tree saw here, so stick with that. Not really too important what height you cut them to, although eventually they will get so thick that it kind of makes sense to go in and saw like the whole main trunk off. Just let it kind of regenerate from that point. All right, so like I mentioned, this material will regrow. So you do have to kind of be careful when you're using it as a chop and drop that you don't end up burying the trunks or the stems, the branches, because they'll just send out roots and create a new plant. The leaf mulch is the really high nitrogen content stuff. So what I often like to do is just strip all that off and then bury that below the other mulch that I have here. So we use our guinea grass to make a lot of mulch here. And I'll just peel it back a little bit, and I'll take like these tops with the flowers and everything. It comes apart pretty easily. And usually this more tender stuff towards the top is not going to root. We'll throw that under there. And then when I get down to this, I just strip it like that. And we end up with a bare stick. And that's going to go on top so that it doesn't re-root. So we just do that. Each one of these, I sort of go around the tree, getting this stuff underneath the guinea grass mulch. And getting it underneath there will help it to stay moist as it breaks down. This is going to help it decompose without losing a lot of the nutrients that are in it. Like I said, these leaves are really high nitrogen. If you just leave them out in the sun and they bake on the top of your mulch, you tend to lose a lot of that nitrogen into the atmosphere, but I believe if you get it underneath this other stuff as it starts to decompose, and it'll capture a lot of that nitrogen, put it into the soil, at least have it be available for the roots of the trees to uptake. Once I get a pretty good sized stack there, I just go ahead and put my mulch back on top of that. Let it break down. Just work our way around the tree. As far as the timing of when you do the chop and drop with the Tithonia, it just depends on a lot of factors on your site, where you are. We are going into the rainy season. Rainy season in Hawaii usually starts around November and lasts till April or so. And depending on which part of the island you're on, a lot of islands have areas that are always raining due to the topography. We're in more of a spot where we get a pretty typical rainy season and a dry season, and they're pretty extreme. Like, our dry seasons can be really dry and our rainy seasons can be really rainy. This year has been a little bit reversed, and so we actually have gotten a ton of rain since July. It's rained almost like every other day, at least, for several months, which partly explains this extreme growth on the Tithonia. And also the timing of this, because we're going into our rainy season, I don't really want as much shade around my plants as I would during the dry season. So it's not a big deal for me to be like removing all this material that in some cases not only provides windbreak but also provides a little bit of protection from the sun. The sun is starting to get weaker for the next few months, and so it's pretty good timing for us to do chop and drop on a lot of our trees, especially the shade ones like our Clearcidia and ice cream bean, that kind of stuff. I want to open that canopy a little bit because the trees that like the shade in the summer, it can be a little bit too shady during the winter because the sun, like I said, is not very strong, and they're just really not getting a lot of sun in the winter, and they can tend to get a little unhealthy, like way too much fungal growth around them, that kind of stuff. So this purple kaimito, the star apple, is a little bit like that. It's a tropical tree, probably very much at home in a rainforest environment. And it can handle the really wet conditions, but I like to give it a little bit of sun during the winter. But also, it's good to do a chop and drop right at the end of your wet season sometimes, because that way you can bank all this moisture down into the soil. So especially stuff like bananas that hold a lot of water, you can cut them right as you're going into your dry season. And that way your soil will retain a lot more moisture, and your trees will have access to that moisture through that organic material that's been placed around them. So there's kind of different strategies with that. I mean, if you do that, you just have to, I guess, make sure that those shade trees have time to recover before your fruit trees get blasted with that hot, dry summer sun in our case. Other places, they get their dry season in the winter when the sun is at its strongest. I'm sorry, at its weakest. And that's a little bit of a different consideration. So lots of different things to consider about your site as far as when you choose to do chop and drop, but in a lot of places, there's really not a bad time to do it. All right, so finish laying these sticks on top. Now, I don't need any other cuttings right now, so I'm just throwing these in here. I'm mostly just kind of breaking them up a little bit so they don't stick out all over the place, but the more you break the stuff up, the faster it'll break down, of course. You could run this stuff through a wood chipper, you get like an amazing nitrogen boost to any compost pile. Because even though this stuff is a little woody, it's still got quite a bit of green to it as well. It breaks down pretty fast once it starts to decompose. So, pretty much takes care of the kaimito. Now we just have to do that about 30 more times. We'll be good. So we'll show you the after video in just a moment. I'm gonna get to work on the rest of these. I'll be right back. Okay, so one thing I've learned about farming is everything takes at least twice as long as you think it's going to. I had to stop and water because it's been really dry. So it actually took me 2 consecutive weekends to get all the Mexican sunflower down. But it's done now. All the trees are fed with the nutrients from that. They're breaking down under the mulch. And those will grow back fast, but probably won't have to cut them again for at least a few months. Maybe we'll go 3 months or so. And then we'll do that process over, and we'll just keep adding mulch till eventually we'll have enough canopy and other support trees out here that we won't really need the windbreak function of them, and they'll start to get shaded out by the fruit trees that they're protecting now, and that'll be the succession as we move from this pasture system on into the food forest. So thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll try to get some more videos up soon, get some more updates on some of the specific things we're trying to do. And we'll see you back here soon at Ina Bear Farm. Aloha.